Hello and welcome to part 2 of the history of Dissection. We're now going to be continuing a little farther into Jon's history and the band's history post Storm of the Light's Bane. Now with that comes talk of a lot of esoteric subjects and how Jon's ideals and religion kind of started taking shape around this time due to his involvement with the M.L.O. Now we're also going to talk about the murder of Ben Meddour, and there are going to be some semi-graphic images shown, so please be aware of that. But it's really important to talk about because it is part of the history of him and the band. There will be care taken to the victim and his memory as well. And then after that, we're going to get into Jon's incarceration and the writing and recording of Reinkaos and Jon's eventual suicide. So without further ado, let's get back into the history of Dissection. So in order to talk about the M.L.O. and kind of the precursor to the murder, we have to go back a little bit in time to the summer of 1995, right after the recording of Storm of the Light's Bane, but just a few months before its release. Nödtveidt and Johan Norman joined the newly formed satanic organization called Misanthropic Luciferian Order, also known as the M.L.O., now known as the Temple of Black Light. Not much is known how Jon and Norman got involved with the M.L.O., but Jon has stated that he was introduced to it early in its inception. What is the M.L.O.? From what little you can find on the internet, it was founded in 1995 in Sweden. They released a modern grimoire called the Liber Azerate, which was co-written by M.L.O. member Magister Templi and Frater Nemediel, also known as Vlad. Now, Vlad is a very important person in this story and history of Dissection. He's kind of a mysterious character, but Vlad is also the other accessory to the murder of Ben Meddour. But he's gone under many, many aliases for mysterious and unknown reasons. Out of all the aliases, these are some that he has been known to have. He was born Shahin Kushnud Sharish. He changed his name to Nemesis Kushnud Sharish. He's been called Vlad. He's called Falsifer. He's called Nemediel, Frater Nemediel, and Victor Draconi. But what is the Liber Azerate? The text describes 11 anti-cosmic gods opposing the 10 Sephirot of the Jewish Kabbalah. The practitioner's goal is to destroy the illusion of the cosmos and awaken the black light of chaos. The order taught that reality is a lie and it's imposed by a false creator god. True Satanists must reject morality, society, and even existence itself. Some of the rituals included meditation, invocations, and symbolic acts of destruction. Now, in the order, Satan was one of the 11 gods and was on the verge of bringing chaos to our world. Nödtveidt had called Dissection the sonic propaganda unit of the M.L.O.
Yeah, well, I think the concept in essence has always been the same for Dissection. It's satanic concept with channeling the chaotic powers, the primeval powers before the creation of everything. And this primeval powers that Dissection is all about, musically and lyrically. And whereas in the beginning it might have been expressed in a certain way, we still keep the essence today. So it's just a matter of the way you express the same feelings and the same thoughts, but with new words perhaps sometimes. And as you also get older, you get a different perspective. In the beginning it might be a bit more primitive, but the rebellious element and the aggressive element is still the same.
And that was mainly because of their metal music style. They achieved a bunch of success in the early 2000s, where they had sold around 200,000 albums worldwide by this point. So that fame boosted the M.L.O's reputation despite remaining a small, secretive organization. Now, in an interview from 2006, Jon had said this, kind of explaining more about the M.L.O, saying, quote, "Certain elements from ancient Sumerian religion play an important role within the belief system that exists within the M.L.O. As, for instance, the creation myth of Enuma Elish. But the Sumerian system in itself is not the main focus. We put focus on all traditions that work with the powers of the night side and which lead through the left-hand path towards gnosis and spiritual transcendence." Like you mentioned, different esoteric currents from ancient Egyptian, Persian, Sumerian, Babylonian, Vedic, Nordic, and Hellenic spiritual practices are of great interest and are given focus within the workings of our order. Some of us also work with traditions derived from Afro-Brazilian Quimbanda and South American cults of the Lord of Death. For me personally, when I read these quotes and hear about their beliefs, as an outsider, it sounds like any other religion. You know, they kind of cherry pick the parts of different religions that align with their beliefs and kind of bastardize it to conform to their outlooks. It's rhetoric-fueled fanaticism of imaginary stories. Albeit, the idea of chaos dragons coming to destroy the universe does sound absolutely metal as fuck from a narrative perspective. Now, he expands on this a little more in a different interview, saying, quote, "The M.L.O. is a chaos Gnostic order, which seeks the true light of Lucifer through the study, development, and practices of all dark Gnostic and satanic magical systems. Our goal is to create a synthesis between the dark tradition of all aeons, thus creating the occult keys that shall open the gates to the forthcoming endless dark aeon. My status within the order is that of a full member of the second grade and a priest of Satan. To become a candidate, one must first of all already be an anti-cosmic Satanist and actively practicing black magician. He or she must wholeheartedly sympathize with and share the misanthropic and anti-cosmic values of the order, and then be ready to dedicate his or her entire existence to following his or her true will in accordance with the dark gods. Becoming an initiate is a long and hard process and can take several years. Some members of Dissection were very involved in the misanthropic Luciferian order." Now, by the time the band had released Storm of the Light's Bane, Dissection had finally hit that stride of being able to do full tours. So over the next year, the band would tour Europe and the US, playing shows relentlessly. Now, before that, Dissection would play shows in Sweden before leaving for a UK tour with At the Gates in February of 1996, followed by a vast US tour with At the Gates and Morbid Angel in March of 1996. Back in Scandinavia, Dissection played at the Rockefeller in Oslo together with Darkthrone and Satyricon, marking the start of a co-headlining European tour. And that was in April of 1996. In 1997, Dissection played the Gods of Darkness tour together with Cradle of Filth, In Flames, and Dimmu Borgir. Dissection and Dimmu Borgir's show at the Live Music Hall in Cologne, Germany on March 31st, 1997 was recorded and released by Nuclear Blast on the live split video cassette Live Unplugged Volume 2. Dissection's world tour of Storm of the Light's Bane ended with appearance at Wacken Open Air Festival, which was recorded and released on the Live Legacy album and the Nuclear Blast festivals. Although this first era of Dissection was pretty much at its peak, and the situation of the band, at least on the surface, seemed to be stable and prosperous, with the band's success peaking, personal differences would prevail. This kind of resulted in Palmdahl leaving the band and being replaced by Jon Nödtveidt's brother M.L.O. for their summer tour festivals. Now, after the summer, Johan Norman suddenly disappeared for several months without notice, with Tobias covering up for him, claiming to know nothing. However, he would remain in close contact with Johan throughout this period. The background of his disappearance being that Johan had turned his back on and betrayed the M.L.O., and he was fearing their retribution. As Nödtveidt was a member of the M.L.O., Johan Norman had left Dissection behind. Nödtveidt was the only member left in the band. He would recruit a new lineup and booked Studio Fredman for the planned recording of their third studio album. But this would not happen for years to come due to Jon being an accessory to the callous murder of Joseph Ben Meddour.
Before I went into prison, the band was on the verge of breaking up. We actually broke up unofficially, and I was putting a new lineup together. It was a temporary setback, but for me personally, it was always just a matter of time until Dissection would be back. There was lots of different opinions within the band about what we were doing, and I always wanted to put emphasis on the satanic concept, as I see that's the reason why I'm playing. That's the reason why I'm writing lyrics. That's the reason why I'm doing Dissection. And obviously that was not an opinion that was shared within the band by all members at that time. And there were lots of things going on around, and I think a lot of turbulence, I think lots of personal differences, and also lots of outside influences, and also a lot of, I think there was lots of hell raising going on at the time, and
So before we get into the story, I want to kind of stress that a lot of these names of places I do not know how to pronounce correctly, so please forgive me on my pronunciation. I will try to do the best I can. Now, according to the police report, a 16-year-old boy was out for a walk through the scenic Kielers Park located in Gothenburg, Sweden. The park is located on Hisingen Island.
Den 23 juli 1997 fick vi in ett larm om att en person hade hittat en död människa i Kielers Park på Ramberget i Göteborg.
Now, the witness told detectives that as he was walking, he stumbled across the body of a man face down at the base of an old water tower. He then immediately contacted the police. The police would arrive and quickly and ostensibly determine that the man had been shot twice. Once in the back, the bullet piercing straight through his heart, and a second shot to his head after he was already on the ground.
Vad man kom fram till var att han var skjuten med 2 skott, förmodligen med en 9 mm pistol, och att båda 2 skotten var direkt dödande, ett i hjärtat och ett rakt genom huvudet.
Police found a bag and a head cap next to his body. The man had no identification on him, leaving the detectives unsure of who the victim was. Luckily, one of the officers investigating the scene eventually recognized the man as someone who frequented the nearby Svingeld neighborhood, which is only about an hour's walk away. Police would then search this neighborhood. They discovered during the search that the man's name was Joseph, and that locals often saw him in the area with a Finnish-looking man.
Och efter några dagar så växte det fram en bild av att det här var en Joseph Ben Meddour, en algerisk 36-årig man som hade bott i Sverige ganska länge. Han var homosexuell och hade under en lång period haft ett förhållande med en annan svensk man.
From that lead in Svingelen, police were able to identify the man as Joseph Ben Meddour, age 36, from Algeria. Joseph had been living in Sweden for about 10 years. He was gay, and the Finnish-looking man was his boyfriend. Now, if you've ever watched any true crime documentary, you know that in most police investigations, the person closest to the victim, whether that's a boyfriend, husband, or wife, are immediate suspects. So the police located Joseph's boyfriend, and according to some sources, the man was Joseph's ex-boyfriend at this time, and they took him into custody. Now, they interrogated him over the course of a few days and eventually released him due to lack of evidence. There was simply nothing to link him to the murder of Joseph.
Utredningen började faktiskt med att pojkvännen här blev misstänkt för det här mordet. Eftersom vi på brottsplatsen hittade både pojkvännens livrem och pojkvännens keps. Vi hade dessutom vittnesuppgifter från det område där Josef bodde att pojkvännen och han hade bråkat dagarna innan mordet.
I 12 dagar sitter ex-pojkvännen häktad, men ingenting kan styrka att det var han som skjutit Josef. Tiden går och polisen får inte fram några nya spår.
So investigators then moved on to their next best lead. Now, looking at the timeline, the investigators had taken another look back at Joseph's movements and whereabouts prior to his death. During this time, investigators discovered that Joseph received a visit from the GIA about a day or two before his body turned up in Keeler's Park. It turned out that Meddour opposed the GIA and abandoned going into service, so this made police believe that Joseph may have been the victim of political assassination by the GIA due to their strict doctrine about abdicating the GIA service, which was somewhat a credible theory, but there was absolutely no evidence to support any of this speculation. And so for months, the investigation had no leads and had ostensibly stalled all progress into the murder, until nearly 5 months later, 290 miles away, police had an abrupt breakthrough in the case. On this day, where they had their breakthrough, a woman walked into a police station asking to file a complaint against her boyfriend, a 22-year-old going by the alias Vlad. She told police that Vlad had beaten and threatened to kill her. Now, along with that contemptible and misogynistic violence, Vlad had also allegedly bragged to her at some point that he and his 20-year-old friend Jon were the killers in the Keeler's Park murder case.
Det talas om homosexmord och ryktas om nynazister, men inga bevis kommer fram.
Då hade de fått in en kvinna där uppe som vi kallar för Linda här. Den här kvinnan berättade att hon ville anmäla sin pojkvän Amir för att han hade misshandlat henne, han hade skurit henne, rispat henne, hotat henne och hotat även hennes barn. Vid ett tillfälle så hade han nu gått så långt så hade han hotat att han skulle döda barnen, de skulle äta upp barnen efteråt och så vidare. Detta gjorde att nu ville hon ha stopp på detta och gjorde en polisanmälan mot honom. I samband med förhöret angående den här polisanmälan så berättar hon också om att Amir och hans kamrat Johan i Göteborg har mördat en person under sommaren som gick.
She also stated she knew the location of the murder weapon, which is a 9mm pistol. So, she shares her version of the events. She says Vlad and Jon were out partying in Gothenburg when they had a chance encounter with Joseph on the street. The two invited Joseph to take a walk in the park with them. They hiked up to an old water tower, then Jon and Vlad attacked Joseph with a stun gun. During this attack, Joseph tried to run away, and as he ran, Vlad shot him in the back, and Joseph fell. Vlad then allegedly handed the weapon to Jon, and Jon allegedly shot Joseph once in the back of the head. After she conveys the story, Stockholm police would then get in contact with Gothenburg police, who confirmed that some of the woman's details matched the crime scene. You have to assume she provided information that was never made public. And so after this confession, the police now had 2 new suspects after months with nothing.
I förhör med tjejen som vi kallar för Linda får nu polisen en detaljerad beskrivning av vad som hänt i Keilers Park. Bara sånt som gärningsmännen kan känna till.
20-åringens kvinnliga vän har tidigare här i TV3 talat ut om sin satansdyrkan.
Satans namn härskar över jorden och världens furste.
I 20-åringens lägenhet i Stockholm hittades också mängder av blod i olika behållare. Blod som kan komma från människor, uppger Expressen.
So during this time when the police would investigate the M.L.O. after the murder of Joseph Ben Meddour, they interrogated former members who described the organization and recounted the occult ceremonies they had attended. Some of the rituals included meditation, invocations of demons, and animal sacrifices, which were cats. They bought them through classified ads. So in the weeks preceding the murder of Joseph Ben Meddour, Vlad had become increasingly extremist in his speech and the idea of performing human sacrifices followed by a mass suicide was discussed at length. During a particular meeting at Nödtveidt's place, a list of possible victims was made. It included a former follower who had defected, former band members or current band members of Dissection at this time, and even Jon Nödtveidt's girlfriend.
De här 2 pojkarna, de tillhörde en organisation som de kallade för M.L.O, Misanthropic Lucifer Orders, som då är en icke-livsbejakande organisation. De var satanister, de dyrkade Satan, de hade ritualer och så vidare.
M.L.O. alltså grundas kring 95, kring mitten av 90-talet. Och en av grundarna är en av de personer som döms för mordet i Kelleys Park. Den andra personen går snart med. Det här är en väldigt liten grupp, förespråkar en väldigt radikal form av satanism. Som är en av de få grupper som faktiskt diskuterar sådant som människooffer.
Nu visade det sig här att det här var en väldigt välorganiserad grupp med både egen bibel, egna skrifter och vapenarsenal och en kassa med pengar för att kunna utföra gärningar och även register över fiender och annat. Så att det visade sig vara en helt annan form av organisation av satanism än vad jag tidigare någonsin hade sprungit på eller ens funderat över.
So after the story of events came to their attention, the police arrested Vlad at his home in Stockholm the very same day. Vlad was still carrying the 9mm pistol that the woman claimed was the murder weapon. And during a search of Vlad's apartment, police found quite a few disturbing items which are going to be on the screen now. They found a satanic altar, pieces of human hair, human bone fragments, a bottle containing human blood, an old skull thought to be from a grave robbery, and various films depicting human abductions. Police would then take him into custody pending charges for the murder of Joseph Ben Meddour, assault and threatening to kill his girlfriend, illegal possession of a weapon, and grave robbery.
Dagen efter grips Lindas pojkvän, som vi kallar för Amir.
Och i trapphuset anträffas han. Stockholmspiketen är med oss och griper Amir. Han har då i byxlinjen en pistol, fullt magasin, laddat och en kula i loppet, alltså skjutklart.
Dagen efter är det dags att gripa den utpekade medgärningsmannen som vi valt att kalla för Johan. Han bor strax nedanför Ramberget i Göteborg och i lägenheten hittas en stor mängd vapen. Men det är inte det som förvånar polisen mest.
Lägenheten var dessutom utsmyckad med svarta altare, med dödskallar, med bilder, med heavy metal, death metal, black metal. All denna hårda musikgenrens bilder från det och skivor och musik från det.
Curiously, he was also allegedly a suspect of the murder of a 16-year-old girl named Malin Olsen, found strangled in a cemetery in 1994 at Östra Kyrkogården in Gothenburg. Police never linked the case of Malin Olsen to Vlad or Jon, and the case is still an open mystery.
Tänkta förekommer också i utredningen om Malin Olssons död. Hon mördades 1994 på samma datum som Algerien mördades i somras. Malin hittades på Östra Kyrkogården i Göteborg, ett känt tillhåll för satanister.
Police then tracked down Jon Nödtveidt and arrested him at his apartment in Gothenburg only a few days later. So now that detectives have been able to establish a clear relationship between Vlad and Jon, their motives still wasn't fully determined due to their conflicting stories, because both men were arrested, their statements would be taken, and they would both conflict with each other. Parties in question involved that night were Jon Nödtveidt, who was 20 years old, Vlad, who was 22 years old, and Joseph Ben Meddour, who was 36 years old. They met seemingly randomly in the middle of the night and took a walk into a public park. Then Vlad and Jon murdered Joseph. But why? Was it a human sacrifice? Was Satanism or the M.L.O. the motive for that murder? So at first, both Jon and Vlad denied any involvement in the murder whatsoever. However, Jon was remanded on probable cause and then eventually would confess. So he gives his recollection of the events, and they are as follows. Jon said that on the night of July 21st, 1997, he and Vlad and two other friends spent the night drinking and partying around Gothenburg. The two unnamed friends headed home early that morning, and Jon and Vlad went to the city center to roam around. They wandered by a park, which was known as a meeting place for homosexual men, and a stranger came up to them and asked them if they were Satanists based on their clothing. The man was Joseph Ben Meddour, and he wanted to know about Satanism. Jon claimed that he and Vlad initially tried to get away from Joseph, who was being persistent with his line of questions. But the two eventually invited Joseph to come to Jon's home. During this discussion, the two had assumed, based on Joseph's behavior and speech, Joseph also touching John's hair and telling him it was beautiful and other things of that nature, Jon and Vlad discerned that Joseph was most likely a homosexual. According to Jon, Joseph's homosexuality offended and angered them both, which gave credence to the murder being hate crime motivated. Eventually, they all arrived at Jon's home, but once they reached the destination, Joseph had refused to enter. Sensing his hesitancy, Jon and Vlad suggested they take a walk to Keeler's Park to continue discussing Satanism. Before they left, Jon entered the home, picked up a stun gun, and the 9mm handgun. Once they were at Keeler's Park, Vlad took the stun gun from Jon and hit Joseph with it. Joseph attempted to flee, and Vlad took the 9mm from Jon and shot Joseph in the back, then in the head. But it's Jon who's putting all the blame on Vlad for the murder. So after Jon makes his confession, Vlad would then make his own. Now, without repeating the same thing again, his story was essentially the same, except Vlad would claim Jon was the one who used the stun gun and the 9mm, thus pushing the blame off himself and onto Jon, much like Jon did with his story. So neither one is trying to take any responsibility for their actions or what happened, and it's really childish. So the two were arrested and charged with the murder of Joseph Ben Meddour, and they would go to trial.
Polisen är nu ganska säkra på att de har fått tag i rätt gärningsmän. Men är Josef ett offer till Satan, eller är han utsatt för ett hatbrott?
Johan och Amir hade varit inne i Göteborg. Hade varit ute och festat flera dagar. På vägen hem en tidig morgon så hade de gått igenom vad som kallades på den tiden för bögparken i Göteborg. Där hade de sprungit på Josef. Josef hade börjat prata med dem. Börjat fråga dem om satanism och ville diskutera med dem. De hade ingen som helst vilja att prata med Josef. Men Josef gav sig inte. Han fortsatte prata på och fråga. Och han kladdade på dem också, tyckte de. De blev heligt förbannade på Josef. Och Josef följde efter dem vart de än gick. Man promenerar upp på Ramberget. Och på vägen dit så gömmer man sig så fort man ser andra människor som är ute och går. Där folk är ute och går med hund och så vidare, som rasar hundar tid på morgonen. Och för mig finns det bara ett enda syfte i det. Och det är ju att man inte vill bli sedd tillsammans med Josef, som man förmodligen redan då hade bestämt sig för skulle dödas. Det som har skett är att alla tre kommer upp på den här platån efter att ha varit nere i bostadsområdet längre nere. Kommer upp hit och det börjar ett bråk. Omgående försöker Amir att paralysera Josef med en elpistol. Han sätter den i nacken på Josef, som inte alls blir paralyserad utan bara blir arg eller rädd rättare sagt. Börjar slåss så att säga i självförsvar för att komma härifrån. Så tappar Johan pistolen som han också har med sig. Amir tar upp den pistolen. Och samtidigt i det läget försöker Josef springa från platsen. Han springer ut över den här slänten. Och i samband med att han går neråt här så böjer han sig självklart ner, för annars så dyker man hela vägen. Kulan går in. Amir skjuter och kulan går in mellan skulderbladen. Ut genom hjärtat, ut genom bröstkorgen. Träffar knät. Vänster knä, och han faller rakt ner och blir liggandes på nedre platån här. Efter att Josef då hade blivit skjuten i ryggen och rullat ner här så blev det här han blev liggandes. Och det var också här som Amir skjuter Josef med det sista skottet i huvudet.
The trial itself was surprisingly swift, considering both Jon and Vlad had confessed to their participation in the murder. Lars Olin, who led the police investigation, stated that homophobia was an apparent factor, but the trial put a lot of focus on the Satanism aspect of the crime due to their involvement with the M.L.O. Now, according to a Swedish radio documentary, the police officially classified and registered the murder as a homophobic hate crime.
Vi har diskuterat om det här var ett hatbrott mot en homosexuell eller om det här är ett satanistmord. Och jag tror faktiskt att det här är en mix. Och visst är det ett hatbrott. För alltihop startar med att att Josef visar sin homosexualitet för de här männen. Och sen under resans gång så har de bestämt sig för att döda Josef. Och om de innan eller om de i samband med dödandet gör det till ett satansoffer, det är omöjligt att svara på. Men ett hatbrott, oavsett om det är riktat mot homosexuella eller om det är ett hatbrott för att man själv är satanist och inte bejakar något levande, det är svårt att säga.
The police recreation and prosecution's version of events didn't differ that much from what Vlad and Jon offered up as confessions, but the most significant difference was that Vlad and Jon each shot a bullet, and so the court would convict both men.
De båda åtalade är satanister, men mordet inget ritualmord, anser åklagaren. Däremot så är deras satanism inte ointressant i sammanhanget, som man uttrycker det. En av de åtalade har tidigare erkänt mordet men senare tagit tillbaks det. Idag åtalas alltså bägge männen för mordet.
Vlad was convicted of the murder. He was also convicted of violence against his girlfriend, illegal possession of a firearm, and possession of body parts. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Jon Nödtveidt was convicted of assisting in the murder and illegal possession of a firearm. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison. After the sentencing, they both attempted to appeal their verdicts, and they lost those appeals, and the court actually increased Jon's sentence to 10 years in prison because of that. Now, during all this, between the sentencing and the trial, the media would be blamed for sensationalizing the events, according to Jon, his management, and Vlad.
Och de två gärningsmännen dömdes av hovrätten till 10 års fängelse var. Och Leif, du jobbade med det här fallet. Hur kom det sig?
Ja, jag var där då. Det var 97. Och jag kommer ihåg att jag var där i Göteborg. Då hände det här, så att jag var där ganska snart.
Du bodde där då, eller?
Nej, jag bodde i Stockholm. Men jag jobbade på Rikspolisstyrelsen och jag hade god kontakt med våldsutredarna i Göteborg. Så jag var där ute och kikade, och det var ju några olika saker vi funderade över. Bland annat de där brännmärkena på ryggen på offret. 3
brännmärken på ryggen, och polisen vet ju ännu inte idag riktigt var de där kommer ifrån.
Nej, det är ju lite olika bud. Att det skulle vara gjort med en cigarett, det avförde vi ganska tidigt med att avståndet mellan dem är lika stort. Va? Och då i så fall skulle offret när de görs redan vara död, för annars hade han ju sprattlat emot. Va? Så att då får man dem inte så där jämnt placerad. Sen kom det upp med elpistol och sådär, men någon riktig klarhet har man väl aldrig vunnit. I början där så hade vi var ju våldsamt intresserade utav offrets pojkvän. De levde i en homosexuell relation med sadomasochistiska inslag, och i kombination med den där skadan då på ryggen så låg det nära till hands att tänka i de termerna. Han hamnade ju också i finkan. Det visade sig sen att han har inte med detta att göra. Han har inte ens träffat offret under den aktuella tiden. Sen vad var det mer? Ja, det dröjde ju 1,5 dygn innan man hittade honom, vilket var konstigt med tanke på mycket folk som sprang omkring där ute. Och där kom väl, jag för mig att rättsläkaren, han låg ju tidpunkten 1 dygn senare, och det tog en stund att reda ut och sådär. Så att det var det var lite motigt där i inledningen.
Och just det här märket här, skottet gick ju rätt igenom ena märket. Då tänker man ju kanske just på något rituellt, eller?
Ja, jo. Ja, en förklaring skulle kunna vara att det är gjort efter döden då, men att inte det har framkommit. Alltså först har man skotthålet och så gör man den här markeringen efteråt. Och då ligger ju offret still, så då är det ju lätt att göra det med vad som helst som är varmt nog. Men
är det gärningsmännen som har gjort det då?
Gissningsvis, ja. Det var intressant ärende, minst jag. Sen dröjer det några månader och sen hör Stockholmspolisen också. Och då serverar de för utredarna i Göteborg väldigt långsökt lösning på en bricka så här. För att den ena gärningsmannens före detta flickvän då, numera hustru tror jag, hör av sig och berättar alltihopa som man egentligen behöver veta, och sen rullas det hela upp. Det är ett mycket intressant ärende. Vad skulle du säga är motivet då? Är det satanism eller är det ett hatbrott mot en homosexuell man? Kombination skulle jag. Man blev hjärtligt trött på Josef. Han har ju goda möjligheter under kvällen att lämna sällskapet, men han är ju som ett plåster på dem. Och då kombinationen av deras allmänna inställning till grovt våld, den är ju minst sagt liberal. Plus det faktum att de har tillgång till skjutvapen och sådana där saker. Och sedan att de naturligtvis är homofoba också. Va? Mm. Det gör ju då att man bestämmer sig för den här lösningen. Det är väl någon lite blandade motiv som det ofta är, va, när det kommer till sånt här.
This prompted Andrea Biaggi, the band's former press secretary, to put up a statement regarding the murder on the band's official website in 2004. Andrea Biaggi had this to say about everything, saying, quote, "These are the hard facts to the contrary of all sensational speculations in the tabloid press and media. On the 18th of December 1997, Jon, together with fellow M.L.O. brother Vlad, was arrested and accused for having shot a 37-year-old homosexual man to death with 2 shots on July 22nd, 1997. The 37-year-old man was killed out of anger because he had harassed the 2 accused men. While Jon and Vlad, by mutual agreement, did their best to mislead the police investigating the shooting by telling different stories, staying true to this mutual agreement and their brotherhood, they would also learn that some of their earlier so-called quote-unquote brothers and quote-unquote friends were stabbing their backs. For example, former Dissection guitarist and M.L.O. member Johan Norman, with his girlfriend, actively helped the police and the prosecutor to nail Jon and Vlad by telling everything he could, as well as fabricating the most exaggerated and unbelievable lies. This was the biggest possible betrayal and treachery from someone both Jon and Vlad had regarded as one of their closest brothers and friends. It obviously was not enough for Johan to run away, hide from, and betray everything that Dissection and the M.L.O. stood for. Now he would openly and in public take his duplicity to new heights. Johan and his girlfriend were also assisted by, among others, Niels Carlin. These are all defectors from the M.L.O. in their cowardly acts of public defamation and betrayal during the trial. Jon and Vlad were more or less on trial for being Satanists and thus supposed dangerous persons, proved by testimonies from betraying friends, such as Johan, and as well as the prosecutors and police manic efforts to, in front of the court, paint the worst possible picture of the 2 accused men. Prosecutor was displaying evidence of Jon and Vlad's satanic beliefs, things that didn't have a thing to do with the crime that they were accused for, like pictures of their personal satanic altars and satanic and occult paraphernalia from their homes, to show the court what kind of extreme people Jon and Vlad were and how deeply devoted they were to Satanism, turning absolutely everything they could come up with against the 2. Well, of course they were Satanists, they didn't deny that, but being a Satanist is not a crime. But it nevertheless made them look real bad, and with the lack of hard evidence, this definitely was crucial to their conviction. The distasteful revealing in this case and the speculations by the sensationalistic Judeo-Christian media only made things worse. It's also remarkable to see how blind people can be, willing to believe just any bullshit they are force-fed by the media, the police, and prosecutors, not realizing that these are just puppets of a corrupt system, where money is the only value and public information is subject to selection based on sensationalism and selling points for selling single copies. And what could be more commercially hard-hitting than a satanic murder? Denying the crime, they were in 1998 sentenced to 10 years prison. Jon was being sentenced for his assistance in the shooting and was also convicted for illegal possession of firearms. So that is Andrea's account of the events and everything going on with it. While, I do agree with some stuff at the end there, about like the corrupt political system and all that and prosecutors and all that kind of stuff. I do think, focusing on the satanic aspect was also not like completely valid. They should have focused more on the crime itself. Realistically, the punishment system over there is much less harsh than in the U.S., so They basically got off light for what they did. 10 years is nothing. As we'll see later, they get out of jail and it's almost as if nothing changes. But Jon had some comments to also say by the end of the trial and after his conviction, saying, quote, "To all those brainwashed, ignorant fools condemning the killing and stating their opinions concerning me or Vlad, I just want to say, fuck you. Who are you to judge anyone?" So I found some unverified reports that Vlad and his girlfriend, the one he beat, actually ended up marrying, apparently. A few books have been released in a Liber Falsifer series, which would lead one to believe that he could be the author, considering Falsifier was one of his numerous aliases. So of course I would be remiss if we didn't end this talking about Joseph. You know, who was Joseph? Whenever there's discourse or speculation about murders, the victims often get disregarded and overshadowed, as any news or media coverage tends to focus on the more salacious aspects of the crime itself, as well as the offenders. However, in real life and in all true crime cases, people's lives were affected, and the victims, like Joseph Ben Meddour, should be remembered, not only because of how their lives ended, but how they lived, who they were, and the people whose lives they impacted while they were here. From an interview in 2022, after years of silence, a family member reached out to give some insight into who Joseph was. They conveyed that the family knew Joseph as kind and intelligent. He always looked out and tried to help wherever possible, often going above and beyond expectations. He spoke English and Swedish and worked as a tailor, as he never got around to finishing school. Joseph left Algeria because one of his friends asked him if he wanted to go to France and the Nordic countries with her, and he accepted, eventually settling in Sweden to live. Now, Joseph was repatriated to Algeria and buried in Algiers. There are some unverified claims that his boyfriend gave an interview with quotes, but I haven't been able to find the source of this information. I couldn't find much more information about Joseph other than this small piece of his short life. Joseph was buried in a cemetery in Algeria along with his parents. I just want to take a moment here to kind of convey my personal opinions on this event. Obviously, the murder that Jon committed, or was an accessory to, along with Vlad, was completely senseless. You know, his reasoning for the things, whether it be satanic or because Ben was a homosexual, are just unforgivable. Now, obviously Jon is gone too, so in this we have lost two people. It's just really important to remember that these are human beings. And yeah, Jon shouldn't be forgiven, but also nobody's making money on his music right now by listening to it. He's gone, and Ben is no longer with us either. So with that, let's get back to the video. So with that horrendous moment in history, we now have to kind of see where the band and Jon goes from here. So in July of 1997, The Past is Alive, which was a compilation record of the band's early recordings and demos, was released. It also contained 2 tracks from another project members of Dissection were in called Satanized, as mentioned earlier. These were the only 2 songs ever written and recorded to a cassette, and the quality is pretty rough, but it is an extremely rare recording, sadly, caught with extremely bad sound quality. So during the time that Jon was incarcerated, a lot was going on, obviously, because he had 10 years to spend his life in jail. Now, during that time, there was a live album released called Live Legacy. It took the recorded live performance from Wacken Open Air in Wacken, Germany on August 8th, 1997, and released it as an album. The song Night's Blood was omitted from this Live Legacy official release because of the irreparable flaws in the sound of the original recording. It was mastered at House of Music in Winterbach, Germany, and released February 17th, 2003.
To 10 years in prison. I had been serving 8 months in custody already, and I was already sentenced to 8 years. I actually got 2 more years, you know. I don't think that I looked so rational about things when I went into prison, because the whole thing was very overwhelming in every way. And I think I just took it day by day as it came, you know. And it was a new situation for me in every way. So it was not just that I could, you know, just from one day to another, you know, sit down and say, okay, now let's do this here, and, you know, now I will have time for this or that. I was just totally overwhelmed by the situation, and I every step into that was a new experience for me, I think, which I learned from, definitely. You realize who your real friends are, and I think that's a really valuable experience, and I think that's something that, you know, I couldn't be more thankful for that, actually. And I think as I got used to the situation, or got more acquainted with the environment in prison, then I would more and more find some kind of, I wouldn't say peace with the situation, but I would find some kind of acceptance about the fact that I had to serve these years.
Now, there were some interviews done after Jon was out of jail talking about his time while incarcerated. The person doing the interview asks if there was any difference from writing music in prison versus writing music in freedom, and if prison had any effect on the new Dissection material that he wrote, and if it would have sounded different if he was out of jail. And Jon says, quote, "I think the only thing that matters is the time, effort, and dedication you put into what you do. But the situation I was in for sure helped a lot. In terms of having time, at least. And to create Reinkaos, I also needed a state of fanatical focus, which was something that I found inside the prison walls." And then they ask him about what he did to pass the time in jail, and if there was any incidents with other inmates, how the situation was in prison. And he says, quote, "You know, my first time behind bars was about 11 months, to be exact. I spent that in custody due to the trial, which means that I was in isolation because of the ongoing investigation. Sometime after the trial, I was transferred to a regular maximum security prison. I would spend the first 6 years in high security prisons like that. Initially, I didn't have the possibility to have a guitar in there, but with time, I eventually got access to both my acoustic as well as my electric guitar. In prison, I would work in the prison industry and study. I was writing music, studying the occult, working out in the prison gym, going for endless walks around the prison yard, and making my acquaintances with the local environment and its inhabitants. I met a lot of interesting people in there, and we had some great times too, no matter being in prison. In 1999, a brotherhood was formed, which consisted of people with very long sentences and strong sympathy for the outlaw mentality and many of the spiritual ideals of the M.L.O. In the end, we had grown into quite a strong force with brothers on all major prisons in Sweden. After a while, the prison authorities did their best to split us up and send members to different places, but we managed to have a good time anyway.
Composing music in prison, that was actually something that was going on from day one, because I was already having songs in the process when I was arrested. So all this material was spinning in my head, and even though I was sitting in isolation, I mean, I was thinking about all this material and, you know, working on the stuff. So I think there was never any I never had a break from that. I just continued, you know, in that way that I was that I had possibility. So later I would have the possibility to use an acoustic guitar, and some years later I got even my electric guitar into the prison. So that helped a lot, of course, because then you could work more directly with the, you know, songwriting. But during all these years, I mean, all the songs from the new album Reinkaos was manifesting, you know, it's material from a long. It's dating from a long time back, you know.
Something to keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, the prison system in Sweden and most Norwegian countries is vastly different than American prisons. They have a lot more freedoms than we do here. So, you know, it sounds like he wasn't really suffering in prison. It's because he probably wasn't. You know, they can get away with a lot more than we can. And then they ask him about any spiritual revelations while in prison, and he says, quote, "I really had the time to connect on a deeper level with the internal force guiding me on the left-hand path."
At times I've been the only member And that has been because I was the only hardcore member that could stand all the setbacks and hardships. But I think also I was the driving force from the beginning. That was something that I really wanted to change, not in terms of my own dedication, but I wanted everybody to have this attitude.
So eventually, Jon was released in 2004. Upon his release, Nödtveidt restarted the band with a completely new lineup.
The main important thing when putting together the Rebirth of Dissection was to be able to stand fully behind the concept of dissection, because this is what we feel, and this is a reflection of our inner spirit. I think it's a matter of meeting the right people who carry the fire inside of themselves. Yep. Well, we have been very lucky, of course, but it was a long road to get there. It started when advertised on the website for members to complete a new lineup, and we got lots of videotapes, lots of CDs, lots of mail and lots of letters from people who wanted to join the band. So, but when it actually came to a practical situation where we would rehearse and where we would meet with the members we have today, it worked out directly in this situation. Since the new material was written before we put the new lineup together, they didn't contribute in the songwriting as such, but they contribute with their own spirit while bringing the new music to life in a rehearsal situation and when playing it. Because it's a big difference between writing music and putting it on tape and then playing it together as a band with 4 individuals, contributing with their own spirit and with their own emotions in their playing style. This way the new material have been elevating to a higher level with all the new members giving their strength into the songs. Yeah, I'm still in contact with both Jon, Ole and Peter, which are good friends of mine. We all went different ways in our lives, and when it came to Ole and Jon, they were both they left Dissection many years ago, and the final lineup we had before my arrest was split up in '97. So the Rebirth of Dissection is a new phase of Dissection.
Leave some words about the music. So I listened to your first single output you made,
and he goes pretty in depth about the lineup change from an interview around 2006 in which he explains the following, saying, quote, "It was a long process and there were quite a few obstacles in the way, too numerous to mention, but my goal was to find a lineup that would share the same visions as myself in terms of using the music of Dissection as a black magical tool. So therefore, I only wanted Satanists in the band, and consequently, the old members were out of the question. And having set up this goal, I didn't make things easy for me. But this was the only way to go, and I was convinced that it was just a matter of time until I would find the right members. Anyway, I came in touch with Tomas in the beginning of 2004. He had heard that Dissection needed a drummer for the new lineup, so he contacted the person running our website. I called him up, and we decided to hook him up with one of my leaves from prison. I had just moved to a more open prison where I would spend the last half year of my sentence, and there I would get short leaves every second weekend. We met up at one of those leaves at a restaurant in Stockholm and talked about everything from his personal convictions, ambitions, and visions of being a Satanist as well as being a musician, and how to make this merge in a band to connect the powers of something as unique as a complete all-Satanist lineup. We had both previous bad experiences playing with people who didn't take things seriously and who didn't share the same convictions for working with the powers of the dark side in a serious way, as well as lacking the ability of putting the proper dedication into a genuinely satanic musical project. We obviously had a lot in common and we both knew what we wanted, so we soon started to rehearse at Tomas' studio, only the two of us, and continued to discuss the concepts of using the band as the satanic tool I always wanted it to be. Musically, I had never met a drummer as skilled and with such a professional approach to his craft before. ranging such broad realms of music, everything from the fastest and most brutal blast beats to progressive rock and the groove and steadiness of hard rock and heavy metal. I guess it's partly a well-earned result of determined dedication to drumming for over 25 years. He could basically play anything and everything. The old Dissection material was no match for him at all. I knew I had found the right man for the job. It was, however, more difficult to find the right guitar player. We searched for months and months without finding the one that we were looking for. It wasn't so much that it was difficult to find talented guitar players. We had many of them applying. Problem was to find someone who was a killer guitar player and a Satanist. After auditioning several guitarists in the summer of 2004, we finally found Set. When he finally came over from Italy, we knew immediately that the search was over. The energy and spirit he radiated at the rehearsal as well as personally made it all very easy for us. He had to be in Dissection. I'd been in touch with him for quite some time via mail, but it wasn't until he came over to Sweden that we got to know each other for real. Set has proved to be one of the most determined people as well as the coolest that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting, and we have been standing by each other as brothers since. As a guitar player, he channels the current like no one else and has been evolving immensely. With Set joining Dissection, the lineup was finally complete and the band was getting ready for the rebirth. We just had to await my release from prison to take place. So in the meantime, the lineup rehearsed intensely without me on a daily basis for the next 2 months, with me joining in on my short leaves.
When I formed the new lineup, so I think that I succeeded. The reason why it was Set and Thomas that became members of Dissection out of all the people that applied was that they were standing out. It clicked, you know. It was on a personal level, on a musical level, and also on the level of our vision about, you know, using Dissection as a satanic tool to express and explore yourself and your inner darkness. And I think that was something that was obvious right away with both Set and Thomas. So for me, it was no question about it.
So I know that's a lot of information, but it's like the biggest quote we have from him. And it's really interesting to see his outlook, completely change from the beginnings of the band. He is only looking at this band as being a tool for Satanism. And he takes it 100% completely serious. Like, this is what he wanted from the band, to be this outlet for Satanism. So Dissection recorded a 2-track EP entitled Mahakali and toured pretty extensively on the Rebirth of Dissection tour. That tour was a pretty big success for the band with sold-out concerts all over Europe and additional gigs in South America and Mexico. It was also the largest tour so far in their career, with about 60 shows in 20 countries.
Anti-cosmic metal of death. Definitely musical and spiritual, because we play the metal of death. The concept is anti-cosmic, and for us this is about the essence of the band. We don't limit ourselves to any specific forms when writing music. On Storm of the Light's Bane, we picked influence from folk music, we picked influences from classical music, because if we would put limits or boundaries on ourselves, the music would be dead. But it's Dissection 7 years later, and the single song is one song out of 11 coming for the next album, and they are all different parts of a whole album concept.
So taken from another interview, kind of talking about the rebirth of Dissection and the tour that they're on, the interviewer asks them about the rebirth of Dissection and a new phase. He asks them, how is it a new phase? And Jon says, quote, "It's a new phase since it is the beginning of the end, and the hungry end is coming soon." Very ominous, if you know the ending of all this, but we'll get to that soon. And then he asks how it was feeling finally meeting the fans after more than 7 years. And he says, quote, "We could have never imagined that the interest and demand for Dissection's return would be so high out there after 7 years of absence. I think it was all like some kind of shock for all of us. Before the first concert in Stockholm on 30th of October 2004, the gig had been sold out twice already before being moved a third time to an even bigger place. But it wasn't until we faced the crowd that it all became clearer to us. For me personally, this moment, walking out on that stage at Arenan in Stockholm, less than a month and a half after my release from prison, is one of the most surreal experiences in my life. That feeling lasted for the entire Rebirth of Dissection tour that followed. Waking up every morning in a tour bus instead of a prison cell, just hoping it would never end. By the time that we came back to Sweden at the end of the tour, we were really sad that the tour was over, but we knew we had work to do. We started to rehearse intensely for the upcoming recording of Reinkaos and entered the studio a little bit more than 1 month after that tour. And he asked him about playing the Inferno Festival in Norway, and something happened at the end of one of their songs where they were playing Elizabeth Bathory, and he asked him kind of what happened with that, and he says, quote, "Well, what happened was that when we had played our set, which was rather extensive, by the way, almost 2 hours, the audience was still demanding an encore after we had left the stage, and they wouldn't stop screaming for it. So we decided that we should give them a last song. So we went up on stage again just to have the stage manager showing up, going all crazy, saying that we absolutely couldn't play more and that they had to close the place. I told him that with all the respect, I didn't think that the audience would agree, seeing that they wouldn't leave and they would surely not be happy if the guards would try to force them out of the hall. The venue had been totally lit up by the lights in the roof and they had shut off the PA. So we just kicked off the song Elizabeth Bathory without any other sound than the amps on the stage and the drums themselves. And since we didn't have any sound from the microphones, we had the audience sing the lyrics for us. The voice of the audience would almost lift the roof alone. The stage manager went out of his senses, of course, but what can we do? I mean, what a memory.
It was unbelievable. It was incredible. It was such a massive energy to meet the people, to play the songs again live, and to see the massive support of everybody who came to the show from all parts of the world, and to celebrate the return of Dissection. To me, this is a dream come true, because for so many years this was just a dream, and it was very distant. So now when it finally happens, from one day to another, I'm being a free man. And that is something that is very hard to describe, because it feels very unreal. It feels too good to be true.
Did you have the wish to turn back time to do things different?
I have to be very realistic and realize that that is not possible. And all the things that you do have consequences, and if the consequences are not repairable, then you cannot change it. So you have to do the best of the situation and take the consequences for your actions, which I feel is the only way. Let's do it. And the whole Rebirth of Dissection was like a big march of victory. We were just, going out there as a band, walking into, some strange, almost like walking into a totally new territory. And I think we pulled it off. But for us, this was just big, overwhelming experience, In the first song, we went up on stage and we were totally hyped, and the audience was screaming, and then when you were about to hit the first chord, there was no sound from the guitars, What the fuck is this? It was actually that the guitar tech had forgotten to put on the standby on the amplifier. It was fantastic. It was the best audience we had, so far, in our history as a band at that point, It's I will always remember this concert, by heart. It's I can say that this is one of the highlights, with the atmosphere. Lots of magic in the air, lots of tension, and some electric feeling that you could touch in the air. During the whole tour, I was always hoping that it would never end, because it was such a great experience to be out again.
waking up in a tour bus and, you know, having the band back together. And I think at the time that the tour actually stopped, we were very, very sad to come home to Sweden, because we were thinking, what the fuck are we gonna do now? You know, what the fuck is this? You know, we want to go on. When is the next gig? So, but I think it was a good to come home and take a break after the tour to digest the whole experience and to also get settled in your own so-called everyday life and get some bits and pieces together, you know, because I was just released after the tour, you know, and also, for example, Seth has moved up from Italy, and I think it was a a big change for him too, you know, and we just started to practice the new songs for the new album and enter the studio 2 months later.
And so this would begin the recording process for Reinkaos. Now, the 2006 lineup for Reinkaos was Jon Nödtveidt on vocals and guitars, Seth Tation on guitars and backing vocals, and Thomas Asklund on drums. There were guest appearances on this album. Bryce Leclerc was credited as a session bassist on this record. There were additional vocals on Maha Kali by Nix 218, additional backing vocals by Eric Danielson and Whiplasher Bernadette. It was produced by Dissection with Nightmare Industries. It was recorded at Black Syndicate Studios in Stockholm, Sweden, then mastered at Cutting Room in Solna, Sweden by Håkan Åkesson, and it was engineered by Skinny, aka Jonas Kanger. If any of these names look or sound familiar, that is because they are members of the band Death Stars, in which John's brother Emil is a member. Reinkaos comes in at 43 minutes and 6 seconds over 11 tracks, and they are Nexion 218, Beyond the Horizon, Starless Aeon, Black Dragon, Dark Mother Divine, Zephyr I Set, Chaosophia, God of Forbidden Light, Reinkaos, which is an instrumental, Internal Fire, and ending with Maha Kali. This would be the third and final studio album by the band, and it was released through the band's own label, Black Horizon Music, which they had formed, quote, out of the need of taking charge of our own business and making things our way without compromise. Basically meaning that they could put the satanic aspect in the music without pushback from the label.
Do it our way now, because we are fed up with being pushed around by record companies and being ripped off and being lied to. That's the reason why we formed our own label, Black Horizon Music, because we have the long and hard experience of the music business. And I think after 16 years as an active band, you have quite a lot of knowledge to tap into and to, start your own business and do it your own way. I mean, that wouldn't be possible 16 years ago or 15 or 13 years ago, but today it is, because Dissection is a well-established name.
So Reinkaos is actually stylized on the record with the O being an omega symbol. And speaking on that title, John has said this in an interview, saying, quote, I take it you're referring to the Reinkaos and its meaning, but Reinkaos does not mean reincarnation of chaos. It means return to chaos, and is the opposite of reincarnation, which means return to the flesh. Reinkaos is the fifth stage of the forbidden alchemy within the teachings of the M.L.O., and is part of the Atazoth process that, through the increasing of the acausal power of the spirit, makes possible the transcending of the world of matter and the returning to pan-dimensional chaos. Reading the different interviews between the early years and this, when John is full-fledged into his personal ideals of what he believes in with the M.L.O. So, like I mentioned, Reinkaos has 11 songs, but 10 of them were composed during time in prison with a collaboration lyric work between John and Frater Nemedial, aka Vlad, who are both imprisoned at the same time. In an interview, he's asked about the album that was supposed to be recorded before his incarceration and the murder happened, and what happened with those songs. And he says, quote, this material was not even far from finished at the time, but was still the seed to what has now blossomed into Reinkaos. The material was constantly growing and evolving during the years in prison, and the songs for Reinkaos manifested. But it took years of nurturing before the seed could come into full-blown in a way that I was satisfied. Not until the album was finally arranged and re-recorded with the complete lineup, actually. Now, the guitars and gear used for the recording of this album, Jon used his black Gibson Les Paul, which was an early 90s model, which he removed the standard Gibson pickup and added an EMG 81 active pickup. This was the guitar on which most of Reinkaos was written on, and also one of his two main guitars during the live shows between 2004 and 2006. One of the reasons is that he had played extremely hard and bumped the Black Beauty countless times during live shows, on people, on the floor, whatever, prior to the recording of Reinkaos, so it got harder to keep the guitar in tune and other such technical issues. And as far as an amp, he used an Engel head and a Marshall cabinet, and he also used an Ibanez acoustic guitar with really thick strings between 0.16 and 0.56 for all the acoustic parts on the album. And Setation used a Gibson Gothic Flying V from 1998, also with EMG active pickups instead of the standard Gibson ones. And he used it on the recordings of Unhallowed, the Rebirth edition, and on the Maha Kali EP. He also used it during the Rebirth of Dissection live DVD and Reinkaos as well. He used a PV5150 amp head connected to a Marshall cabinet. They both use Boss digital delay effects pedals, also live between 2004 and 2006. During the Rebirth of Dissection tour in 2004, they both used Marshall heads and speakers and the Boss Metal Zone pedals for distortion and the classic Boss digital delay pedals. And they also both used Korg DT10 guitar tuners.
But it's all been developed, and, not until we finally recorded it, it was finished. It was always worked on, especially when we took it to a situation where we started to rehearse the material with the new lineup, and everybody put their own spirit into it and took the music to a higher level. So for me it was an eye-opener in many ways, because I was getting the chance to see my own life from a different perspective, and to get some kind of restart, or what do you say. And I'm not talking about being adapted to society or anything like that, because that's the last thing that would ever happen to me. But I'm talking about getting some kind of distance and a break to think about what I really want to do. And I think that gave me the possibility to appreciate certain things more and to value.
As mentioned earlier, Reinkaos is inspired by the Liber Azerate, the M.L.O's belief system. In this album is condensed down to about 11 tracks, which is a number you'll notice referenced a few times throughout. Now, there's a lot to dig in with these lyrics and its occult mysticism, along with how Jon imbued the Liber Azerate into that musical outlet. Now, on one hand, it can be viewed as a concept album, and on the other, it's just satanic-fueled propaganda, depending on how you choose to consume this album. Nonetheless, it is very interesting to look at these lyrics in a more in-depth way. Saying, quote, "Definitely the new lyrics on the studio album coming out this year, these new lyrics are satanic formulas. Voces magicae, that is, expressions that consciously channel the anti-cosmic and chaotic energies of the wrathful gods through the power of verbal magic. The recording process will involve advanced ritualization, and listening to this album will lead you to release the energies channeled through the music." He continues on saying, "I use sound vibrations, formulas, power names, and words charged with meaning in the anti-cosmic tradition. The aim is to have a direct impact on the person listening to the music. This was not something we did in our previous recordings. It is a new and conscious step in Dissection's evolution and strategy. Dissection is the harbinger of misanthropic revolution, the bearer of change and chaos Gnostic awakening. We are part of the chaotic fire that will internally dissolve cosmic creation." But he does continue on saying, quote, "The lyrics reflect the occult tenets of the misanthropic Luciferian order, aka the M.L.O. He continues saying, "The M.L.O. plays a large role for Dissection, and even though Dissection is the sonic propaganda unit of the M.L.O., The M.L.O. in itself has got nothing to do with the music. The lyrics are based on invocations and formulas that have been linked into the lyrics to evoke the powers that they represent. Occult musical theory has been applied in the songwriting process as a means of symbolically charging their structures. They have also been written inspired by scientific ideas such as string theory. The songs have all been written with the intention of using sounds and vibrations as an anti-cosmic tool, and they have all been consciously created to be the vessels for these powers. In the grimoire Liber Azerate, released by the M.L.O., Reinkaos is defined as the return to chaos and a causal existence.
I think with a new album coming out, the circle is closed and broken. That's what we're standing before right now. Closing the circle and breaking it. So it's gonna be very interesting. This is the first full-length album in 11 years, as you say, and it's like we're about to enter a new phase of the band. The Rebirth of Dissection was like a victorious return and remembering the old and playing the old material and meeting the fans, and after all these years, and to actually, proving to the world that Dissection is back.
So with all that in mind, let's take a little deeper look into the tracks of this record, starting with Beyond the Horizon. So this song has to do with the 11-headed anti-cosmic dragon Azerate. Vidergal Tikels Sondas Azerate is the conjuring of the said dragon. And if you look at the formula in the song Starless Aeon, Dies Irae, Dies Illa, Solvet Cosmos in Favila, Vocamas te Eshma Diva, and that means the day of wrath, that day will dissolve the cosmos to ashes. We call upon Eshma Diva, and Eshma Diva means the god of wrath in Persian. Black Dragon. Now the opening narration of Tohu Tiham Telitan Leviathan Taniver Tanisam is a satanic formula that's used in dark rituals in order to channel the black dragon's energy. The track tells of a black dragon to evoke from slumber and to rain chaos upon the earth. The track then names other dragons that are responsible for various chaotic ire. You have Apep, the dragon of darkness and ruler of emptiness; Jormungand, ruler of the poisonous seas; Tiamat, queen of the formless deep; Leviathan, seemingly the titular black dragon of chaos; and Typhon, the lord of dark desires. Dark Mother Divine. This song is dedicated to the force known as Lilith. Lilith represents the archetypal force that allows humans to break free from cosmic constraints, both symbolically and in ritual practice. Without her, the anti-cosmic path would lack its maternal source of chaos and rebellion. Specific lyrics in the song like "We wash your lotus feet with blood" and "In thy name we sacrifice" frame the track as an audio invocation or black magic ritual meant to open spiritual gateways to the underworld or the Qliphoth. Zephyr I Set. And this translates roughly to "I am becoming into being as Set," or identifying oneself with the dark adversarial god of chaos and the night. The lyrics do invoke dark deities and cosmic forces such as Typhon, Apophis, or Apep, and the Black Sun to shatter more conventional spiritual laws, referred to as breaking the laws of Mat. In one of the more interesting and telling lines from this song, Nödtveidt kind of embraces that role of the outsider and the destroyer, saying, "I'm the murderer who refuses to submit. I am the opponent, the sworn enemy," which sort of reflects a strict antinomian philosophy of total resistance against conformity and cosmic order. Chaosophia. Now this word translates literally to the wisdom or philosophy of chaos. This philosophy views the material universe as a cosmic prison created by a false order. Chaosophia symbolizes the hidden dark wisdom meant to shatter cosmic constraints, awaken the inner black flame, and return creation back to formless, dynamic chaos. While it does contain no lyrics or vocals, the acoustic arpeggios serve as sort of a ritualistic charging of the album's atmosphere. God of Forbidden Light. The song honors Lucifer, not as a Christian monster, but as a primordial illuminator. Titanic Prometheus, and the god of forbidden light, who gifts humanity forbidden knowledge, spiritual awakening, and inner rebellion. The repeated phrase, Liu se teteros volt seats Lucifer, acts as a ritualistic invocation or magical formula from the M.L.O., intended to open spiritual gates and awaken inner chaos. Internal fire. The opening chant, Teniver Liftoshnia, is a quixotic, Kabbalistic invocation translating roughly to Blind Dragon, Open Your Eyes, symbolizing the awakening of blind inner sight and primal chaos energy. This song is about the awakening of the black kundalini, contrary to regular kundalini, which when awakened causes one to be filled with love and compassion, but the black kundalini is chaotic and wrathful. It's an inner metaphysical force or energy. Now, speaking about writing Mahakali, Jon has said this, saying, quote, at first I had absolutely nothing, and after a while I was allowed to own an acoustic guitar, and sometime later I finally got an electric guitar and a small amplifier. But I wasn't allowed to record anything, so I just played and practiced for myself. All of the arrangements and riffs that came about were stored only in my head. There was no other way. A long time later, I was allowed to use a tape deck to finally record my song ideas provisionally. Now, during my last year in prison, I had occasional access to a computer with recording software. There, I recorded most of the riffs and vocals for Mahakali and also arranged a lot of the pre-production for the other songs on the new album. The song is about the Hindu goddess Kali, also known as the Black Mother. She is the goddess of disillusionment and destruction, and she brings precisely these upon the cosmic universe. We are currently living in the final phase before the complete dispersal of the cosmos, and Kali is bringing us exactly that. She creates, sustains, and destroys. This age in which Kali brings us the end is therefore called Kali Yuga, the age of Kali. We are living in the final phase of this time. The end is imminent. So it's very interesting when you kind of see and look at what each of these songs are about, little brief glimpses into the Liber Azerate and what they believe. If Jon did imbue this album with magical powers and incantations, then it makes it much more interesting every time you listen to it. So definitely keep that in mind the next time you listen to Reinkaos. And so in an interview after the album was released, which we're still going to get through more of that, a lot of people were criticizing the album that it doesn't sound anything like the previous two Dissection albums. And to that, I would agree somewhat, but I also think this album is absolutely incredible, but more on that later. And they ask him, a lot of complaints about the Dissection sound is too far of older Dissection. And he says, quote, "Our aim has not been to copy ourselves. The old albums, which I'm very proud of, by the way, are still available for everyone who wants to listen to them, so there's nothing to complain about unless your CD player doesn't work." He says a pejorative here that I'm not going to repeat, but he said it would be a sign of if we would be standing on the same spot for 11 years. Those who don't evolve will perish.
For me, music is all about feeling, and I think it's up to the listener to feel the music in any way he or she likes to do or how it comes naturally. And I think to feel music is emotion. To be able to feel it, you don't need any, education. You don't need any pre-learned knowledge. You just have to get into the music and feel it. That's all.
And then they kind of ask him about the black and death metal scene and how Dissection seems to follow their own path from the scene and why that is. And he says, quote, "You're right. And this is simply because we play Satanist music. We follow our own path in that aspect, and we don't have a need to be a part of any musical or metal scene. Actually, we kind of distance ourselves from it to the highest extent. For us, there is no scene to be a part of, nothing we identify with. What is there? Quote, death metal? And as far as I'm concerned, it has got nothing to do with worshiping death, as it, according to certain people, was meant to be about. And nobody who started out the black metal thing were Satanists either. And just like the bands of today, it was just a gimmick with its lyrics and imagery. As the members of Dissection both belong to the cult of Satan Lucifer and the necroscophic cult of the Lord of Death, we have chosen to label our music anti-cosmic metal of death to show the spiritual direction of our work. We don't belong in the current music scene."
We are Satanists.
What does that actually mean in your music?
It means, apart from the music is a channel that we use to spread our beliefs.
Dissection are a black metal band from Sweden. Their credentials in the world of extreme metal are impeccable.
I was sentenced to 10 years in prison for accessory to murder. Well, I was involved in a killing of a man. Satanism is dangerous, of course. And if you choose to rise up against something, then you have to use violence. And I say that people, you know, will always kill each other. Most bands are just playing with this Satanism thing, just because, of course, it always attracted kids. And what we're actually doing with Dissection is to shape again the black and death metal scene so that it becomes something more serious and not just, you know, bullshit for kids that just want to have fun and drink a beer, you know?
Worries about the effects of heavy metal are nothing new. In the 1980s, people claimed to have found hidden messages in Ozzy Osbourne's lyrics, from Elvis Presley to punk rock.
And then they ask him how they view the reception of the music after almost 11 years. And he says, quote, "I'm very pleased with how the album has been received so far by both those who like it and understand it, as well as those who don't. As for those who don't understand it, the album was never meant for them. With the music as a ritual tool, we aim at reaching out only to the ones of the same spiritual blood as ours, those who can find the essence behind the forms of the music. For all the others, the music will still just be sounds that they can either like or dislike." Then they ask him what lies ahead for the band in the early days of Reinkaos' release. And he says, quote, "Every journey has its end, and we are now reaching the end of the line with Dissection. But we still intend to leave our final mark by performing the material for Reinkaos live." And so that prompts the interviewer to ask, well, what does that mean? Like, are you disbanding? What's going to go on with that after the Midsummer Massacre? He feels like they're going to quit and disband. And he says, quote, "What we have in front of us now are a few extremely select concerts that will mark the end of Dissection, out of which the Dissection Midsummer Massacre in Sweden on the 24th of June will be the only European concert, as well as the last. We will also make our final and last concert in Israel, as well as 2 final concerts on the American continent. I have reached the limitations of music as a tool for expressing what I want to express for myself and the handful of others that I care about, and I will now move along to other realms of practice. Reinkaos has been our only focus for such a long period of time, and all the work and fanatic dedication put into the band by each member has been directed into this album. With Reinkaos finally recorded and released, I also realized that there is nothing left for me to do with Dissection. We have succeeded with our task to manifest, in essence, a truly satanic record blessed by the dark gods, and we have succeeded with our goal to manifest a truly satanic band. My goal was to bring back Dissection with full force and to make it the satanic unit I always wanted it to be, and the tool for completing the personal black magical work that was started many years before. With Reinkaos, this has all been achieved, and I'm very, very pleased with the result. It wouldn't even be desirable for me to follow it up, since everything that I ever wanted to express is in there. That's why we now have decided that this is the time to move on, and where Dissection will no longer be an active band. So it's a great victory for me to move beyond this phase of personal becoming. With Reinkaos, we have reached the ending chapter. Dissection's work is done, and this is our legacy. I want to thank my brothers in battle, Set and Tomas, for making this possible. Salve Satan, salve Azarate 218. So very ominously, very curiously, he has stated that this is the end of the band. After these shows, Dissection will no longer exist. Now for him, he was explaining that as he doesn't want to make music anymore. As we know coming up, it will be a completely different ending for Jon and what he spoke about in this time. The more curious thing about this is during this time, Jon destroyed 2 guitars during different shows. The ones that he destroyed, Gibson Les Paul Black Beauty, as it was called. The exact year of it's not known, but it's either a 50s or 60s model, In other words, it was a very old guitar, and that was the one he smashed at Wacken Open Air in 2005. The Gibson Flying V, the white one, this was actually bought shortly before the Midsummer Massacre because the original one he used in the 90s was gone, and he wanted it as one of the guitars to play live in the final show. That one was destroyed in Stockholm at the end of Mahakali at the Midsummer Massacre. Now, none of those guitars were used on Reinkaos, according to Cetacean's memory. There's a possibility that Black Beauty might have been used for a couple of solos at best, but that's it. And he says, honestly, I don't recall that for sure. The main recording guitar that John used was the Black Gibson Les Paul Studio. And he says, quote, ultimately, only the soul and spirit of the ones brandishing these instruments is what matters. So in May of 2006, shortly after the release of Reinkaos, the band announced plans to split up following a very short tour. The tour was scheduled to include 2 appearances in the United States, but these were eventually canceled after Nödtveidt was denied an entry visa to the country due to his previous incarceration. So the band played its final European concert in Stockholm on June 24th, 2006. Some former members of Dissection have gone on to form other bands, and those bands were also influenced by their beliefs based on the M.L.O. Now, the crazy thing about all this is there's a Vice article interviewing a kid that actually caught the Flying V guitar from the Midsummer Massacre show, and we're going to read that now. It was originally published August 31st, 2006 on Vice.com, and the photo's by KJ, which mysteriously, I couldn't find any information about this, but I wonder if it is the KJ from Rabbit's Carrot. And so it says, my name is Hampus, and I'm 9 years old. I was the little guy people have been talking about who got John from Dissection's guitar at the Midsummer Massacre. Here's the story. Me and my dad and a couple of people went to Stockholm by bus to see the last ever concert of Dissection. I had listened to them a couple of days before the concert. We got there and Niflheim opened for Dissection. Shit, they were so good. It was easily the best concert I've ever seen. And then Dissection played, and they were almost as good. I was banging my head, and at the last song, John held his guitar over his head, then he smashed it to pieces on the stage. Then he threw it towards the audience. It bounced against the rails and lay in front of the first row where I was. After the concert, me and my dad and a friend stayed behind, and the security guard came up to me and asked if I liked this kind of music. Of course, I said a big yes. He pointed to the guitar and asked if I knew what it was. I said, sure, that's John's guitar. He laughed and then said, would you like to have it? And I said, can I? And he said, just wait a little so there's not so much people around that'll get jealous. I got the guitar, and the singer from Niflheim came and took me backstage. And he says, quote, a big thanks to Hell Butcher. He says, I met the whole band backstage, and they all signed, quote, my guitar. Thanks, guys. John signed it to Hampus from Dissection. When we walked back out of the bus, a lot of people came up and talked to me and took my picture. It felt really good. I stayed up all the way back to Uddevalla, and we didn't arrive until the morning. Usually I have to go to bed at 10. Now I have all 3 Dissection albums. I like the Somber Lane the best. I like the songs, but Reinkaos is really good too. All in all, I have about 160 albums. Yeah, on vinyl. I prefer vinyl and metal. What a little precocious kid, even back in 2006. A lot of people have asked me if they can buy the guitar, but it's not for sale, and it never will be, not for $1 million. And what do I want to be when I grow up? A headbanger. And that was by Hampus. So yeah, pretty crazy story. You know, this 9-year-old kid catching this guitar or getting it after the show, basically, from one of the people that work at the venue. I mean, as you can see, there's pictures on screen here of Hampus and the guitar and everything. Insane piece of memorabilia. I would love to own this guitar. I wonder if Hampus is still out there and he has his guitar still. I hope he does. Hampus, never sell that guitar, buddy. So pretty cool story I found while doing research. Can't believe. In 2006, Dissection's U.S. promoter Jim Mills posted a previously unpublished interview with Jon Nödtveidt on his MySpace page. These are excerpts of that interview. So they start off with asking him, based on his discography, if he's very fond of thrash metal and that he had played in a few thrash and heavy metal bands at the beginning of his career. How do you view this genre today, and are there any thrash bands you like, and why did you switch from thrash to black metal? Jon says, quote, Dissection has always been about originality, with a dynamic and sound-shaped darkness. My musical goal in Dissection has always been to shake the status quo, push and even break the existing boundaries, thus getting closer to the band's ever-evolving vision. My aim is to realize my dark artistic and musical dreams. Complete artistic freedom and my hellish love for this ominous music, I always want to be free, unlike those who confine themselves to any genre by constantly pushing new boundaries and aiming for constant evolution. I want to introduce the listener to real darkness, to make them discover the black flame within them. I want to plant the anti-cosmic seed in the listener's subconscious, thus accelerating the process of returning cosmic creation to the formless chaos from which it came by opening new dark holes in the collective soul and the human mind. Dissection is a tool that channels the wrath of the ancient dark gods. I want the listener to unleash the chained beast within, to break the chains of illusion, slavery, and stagnation. Chaos from order, hail the beast. Here's a really interesting tidbit from this interview, because I know occasionally when Dissection gets brought up, obviously the murder gets talked about a lot, but sometimes he gets lumped in with Nazi ideologies and stuff. But they just straight up ask him, what's his attitude towards the increasing Nazi tendency in today's black metal? And he says, quote, until a few years ago, everyone was either a Satanist or interested in the occult and magic. Today, most of these people have turned into fascists. Do you think it's a trend or something else? Just belonging to a certain nation never makes you a superior human. Simple racism or nationalism is just another form of herd mentality that allows weak-minded people to feel superior to each other without any logical justification. They are a passive, easily guided, apathetic herd of cattle who only boast about where they were born instead of improving themselves. So I don't know what more you need to hear other than that. I think that's pretty solid, his stance on that he is not for fascist ideals or Nazi ideology whatsoever. In fact, it really just seems like he believes in more nihilistic than anything. He just wants everything to end. And they ask him if he had the chance to go back in time, if he would change anything in his life. He says, quote, I believe in development through experience, and sometimes these experiences can be quite challenging, but this strengthens the soul. Therefore, I don't want to go back in time. I prefer to make the changes that I desire today and focus on the future, all in accordance with my own true will. And he asks him if the years spent in prison changed his worldview or behavior or his attitude towards life, which, in my opinion, just reading all this stuff, it seems there was a huge change. He just delved more into his beliefs. He says, quote, these difficult years in prison, all the setbacks and difficulties I have experienced mean constant personal development, empowerment, and evolution. Prison is where the weak die and the strong survive. These years strengthen my will 1,000-fold. My hunger for dissection has never been so strong. Of course, everything seemed distant in terms of time, but dissection was always very alive in my heart. I never doubted the future or the band's return. I always kept the flame of dissection alive, and today it burns stronger than ever. From difficulties to the stars, as they say, dissection will return in full. What we were in the past was nothing compared to what we will be. Dissection will return, destroy, conquer, and take what is rightfully theirs. We want blood, and our hunger is insatiable. The worthless has ruled for a long time. Dissection will celebrate its absolute victory by washing in the blood of the worthless. Don't expect mercy. The coming dark age is ours. But he does continue with that sentiment, talking about being in prison, and he says, many people break in such a situation. It's all about being aware of what you truly want. Willpower is the key. You can even use disadvantages and problems to your advantage. Everything you experience can make you stronger. All of this can give you the strength to do what you want and achieve your goals in life. And so we ask him, what are the values in his life? And he says, quote, the thing I value most and constantly pursue is freedom beyond all boundaries. So this is the most interesting part of the interview, in my opinion, because he really goes into the deep parts of the M.L.O. and all this crazy cosmic shit. So they ask him, how would he define himself? What are the most fundamental characteristics of your character that you think are sometimes misunderstood. And he says, quote, I consciously and wholeheartedly fight against the cosmic tyranny and oppression to which humanity willingly surrenders. I refuse to serve the cosmic order and be someone else's creation, to be a passive victim of cosmic fate. I will not be one who is chained to the wheel of life, blinded by illusions and lies that exist only to keep us in line. Anti-cosmic Satanism represents the exact opposite of what the oppressive cosmic order wants you to be. That's why it's unnatural, revolutionary, and elitist. The path is a dark, empowering, and dangerous path that the strong advance on for freedom and enlightenment with their inner will. By moving away from the predetermined conditions of existence, I choose to be reborn and free myself from my chains entirely by my own true will. This will to power and the desire for eternal transformation is unnatural from a cosmic point of view because it leads directly to the purifying darkness of the unknown. This is in harmony with the anti-cosmic impulse, not the cosmos. This anti-cosmic impulse is the external reflection of the inner black flame and is expressed by the names Satan, Lucifer, and Set as our God and ideal. I see Satan as the wild and chaotic force that constantly destroys all stagnant and soulless forms. It forces creation, the cosmic order, back into the formless chaos from which it came. Lucifer is my ideal, the archetypal representation of spiritual enlightenment and the Promethean thirst for knowledge. And Prometheus in Greek mythology stole the god's fire. And it continues saying, quote, that's why I must fight for revolution, wisdom, and freedom. Anti-cosmic Satanism is the ultimate revolution against cosmic oppression. That's why I believe in the day of wrath, when the cosmic order will be completely destroyed. Until then, I will continue to grow stronger, allowing the black flame within me to fully rise, so that my essence may become one with its external source. My anti-cosmic philosophy, my visions, and my ideals represent a struggle for the unlimited freedom of the soul and a return to chaos. Do I think I am sometimes misunderstood? Of course. But anti-cosmic Satanism is not for the insensitive masses. This doctrine is for the secret elite who carry the divine Luciferian spark within. It seems like he believed all of this stuff wholeheartedly and truly lived it and breathed it. And the last thing they ask is, now that you're older, been in prison, had a lot of time to look on your life, how or what did you decide to change your life, and any changes with dissection? And Jon just simply says, quote, death as my advisor in life, every day is my last. And so on August 13th, 2006, Jon Nödtveidt committed suicide. According to the Swedish Expressen, the police said that Nödtveidt was found with a satanic Bible in front of him, which Blabbermouth.net falsely reported to be a copy of, and it was later confirmed by band members' citation to be a satanic grimoire, which is believed to be the copy of the Liber Azerate, written by Frater Nemedial, leader of the M.L.O. So with Nödtveidt's death, any possibility of a reunion was lost, as he had remained the only original member since Dissection's foundation.
I think what we want in the end is to become one with this source.
Hey, thank you all so much for checking out this video. If you like these videos and these little mini documentaries, please hit like, please hit subscribe, tell a friend, go spread it around on the internet. Let me know bands you would like to see me cover, and I will do my best to cover them. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.